This deal is landing just days after the most furious diplomatic breakdown in NATO's 77-year history. After President Trump's explosive remarks claiming that America's allies stayed off the front lines in Afghanistan, the alliance is no longer just strained, it is effectively frozen. World leaders are not simply angry, they are mobilizing. They are not issuing press release bans, they are executing strategic ones. Right now, a new economic circulatory system is being built, one that deliberately bypasses Washington. The idea that NATO is broken is no longer a theory or a warning. As of this morning, it is operational reality. The United States is actively withdrawing from 66 international organizations. Tariffs as high as 41% are hitting America's closest allies. And now those allies have responded, not with troops, not with missiles, but with ink. In this report, we're going deep. We're exposing the exact terms of the EU-India deal signed today. We're breaking down the specific insults that pushed the UK and Germany to turn their backs on the White House, and we're confronting the terrifying economic reality of what an isolated America looks like in 2026. This is the story of how the West didn't collapse. It divorced the United States. To understand why Ursula von der Leyen and Narendra Modi are smiling in New Delhi today, we first have to understand why leaders in London and Berlin are furious. Because the trigger wasn't policy. It was an insult. Last Thursday on Fox Business, President Trump rewrote the history of the Afghanistan war. Attempting to justify his isolationist stance and renewed threats to leave NATO, he claimed that America's allies, countries like the UK, Canada, Germany, and Poland, quote, stayed a little back, a little off the front lines, while American troops did the fighting. The diplomatic fallout was instant and nuclear. For the first time in decades, a British Prime Minister publicly rebuked a sitting US President with open anger. Sir Keir Starmer called the remarks frankly appalling and deeply insulting. And this time, the anger wasn't emotional. It was factual. Let's look at the numbers, because it was the numbers that detonated this crisis. The United Kingdom lost 457 service members in Afghanistan. Canada lost 158. Germany lost 59. Denmark, per capita, suffered some of the heaviest casualties in the entire coalition. These were not symbolic deployments. These soldiers weren't guarding supply lines or staying in the rear. They were fighting in Helmand Province. They were fighting in Kandahar. They were dying in the same dust, under the same fire, as American Marines. So when President Trump suggested that these allies stayed back, it wasn't just offensive, it erased blood. Germany's defense minister, Boris Pistorius, broke diplomatic protocol entirely. He went on German public broadcaster ARD and demanded an apology from the United States. He said, "It is simply not true, and it is deeply disrespectful to speak about the deaths of our allies this way." And this is where the situation crossed a critical line, because NATO is not held together by treaties alone. It is held together by trust. Article 5, the promise that an attack on one is an attack on all, only works if allies believe their sacrifices matter. When the President of the United States dismisses Allied deaths as staying back, he isn't just insulting partners. He is signaling that their blood no longer buys protection. And Europe understood that message immediately. This wasn't something to wait out. This wasn't weather. This was climate change. If the US president doesn't respect their dead, Europe realized, he won't defend their borders either. That realization accelerated everything. Slow, cautious trade negotiations with India suddenly became a sprint. If NATO is fractured, and if the transatlantic trade bridge is burning under steel and auto tariffs, Europe needed a new anchor. They looked east, and they found India waiting. So here's what happened next. Quietly, efficiently, and with devastating precision. While Washington was locked in arguments over tariffs and loyalty tests, Brussels and New Delhi finalized a deal that has been drifting on and off the table for nearly 2 decades. On January 27, 2026, it was signed. The European Commission called it the mother of all trade deals. And for once, that phrase isn't exaggeration. This is not a small adjustment. This is not a symbolic agreement. This is the largest economic realignment of the Eurasian Rim in modern history, and the United States is not part of it. Let's break down what was signed, using the official data released this morning. First, scale. The EU-India agreement creates a free trade zone covering more than 2 billion people. That is over 1/4 of the world's population. Second, tariffs. The deal eliminates tariffs on 96% of European goods entering India. That is unprecedented. India has historically been one of the most protectionist economies on Earth. They don't open doors easily. For Europe, they kicked them down. Now let's talk about the sector that explains why Berlin and Paris moved so fast. Cars. For decades, European vehicles faced tariffs of up to 110% in India. That made German and Italian cars effectively unsellable at scale. Under this deal, that tariff collapses to 10%. This is a gold rush. Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW. Companies currently being crushed by Trump's tariffs in the US market have just been handed access to the fastest-growing middle class on Earth. Europe didn't lose America. It replaced America. And it's not just cars. Indian tariffs on wine and spirits, once as high as 150%, slashed. Machinery tariffs of 44%, gone. Chemical tariffs of 22%, gone. Pharmaceutical barriers, gone. In return, India receives tariff-free access for 99% of its exports to the EU. Textiles, leather goods, jewelry. Sectors employing millions of Indian workers now have a direct, tax-free pipeline into Paris, Berlin, and Rome. And the timing is everything. Just as Indian exporters face Trump's new reciprocal tariffs, 25% to 40%, Europe swings its doors wide open. Just as European manufacturers hit a 15% wall in the US, India becomes their new outlet. This is a classic pincer movement. 2 massive democracies hedging against the instability of the third, and Europe made the message explicit. Standing beside Narendra Modi in New Delhi, Ursula von der Leyen said, "We have sent a signal to the world that rules-based cooperation still delivers results." That signal wasn't for Beijing. It was for Washington. It said, "We don't need you to prosper." Now this is where the word ban starts to matter, even though no one has signed a document that says it out loud. Because in geopolitics, you don't need to formally expel a country to neutralize it. You just change the locks. This is what analysts call a soft ban. A soft ban doesn't look dramatic at first. There are no speeches, no flags pulled down. Instead, it happens quietly, through behavior. A soft ban is when allies stop sharing sensitive intelligence because they don't trust what the White House will do with it. A soft ban is when trade routes are redesigned to avoid your ports. A soft ban is when major summits turn into G6+1 meetings, where the real decisions are made before the American president even enters the room. And this is exactly what is happening right now. While Europe integrates economically with India, the United States is retreating into a form of self-imposed isolation. President Trump has launched what he calls the Board of Peace, an alternative global forum that includes Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban, while excluding traditional Western allies. At the same time, the U.S. has withdrawn from 66 international organizations in a single year, dismissing them as globalist traps. The result is simple. The world is reorganizing without Washington. Look at Europe's sudden push for strategic autonomy. For years, this phrase meant very little. It was a policy buzzword in Brussels, vague, theoretical, distant. Today, it is a survival strategy. The EU-India deal doesn't just cover trade. It includes defense coordination, maritime security, cyber cooperation, and Indo-Pacific stability. Conversations that used to run through Washington. Now they don't. India is pivoting too. For years, India was a cornerstone of the Quad alliance with the US, Japan, and Australia, designed to counter China. But with the US becoming unpredictable, imposing tariffs, threatening visas, questioning alliances, India is diversifying. New Delhi has made a calculation. A partnership with Europe is safer than a marriage with MAGA. And here's the part Americans need to understand clearly. This isolation is not symbolic. It is expensive. President Trump believes tariffs will force companies back to the US. He calls it rebuilding. He calls it strength. But economists warn this strategy comes with a hidden cost. Market access. American farmers, manufacturers, exporters. They depend on foreign buyers. When Europe and India eliminate tariffs between themselves, American goods become less competitive overnight. A French farmer can now sell wheat to India tax-free. An American farmer cannot. An Indian buyer doesn't care about ideology. They care about price. This is how superpowers decline, not through invasion, but through exclusion. And by the time Washington realizes what's happening, the shelves will already be stocked with German appliances, French fashion, and Italian food. The future markets are being filled, and America isn't invited. And this is where all the threads collide. Trade, NATO, Greenland, and America's place in the world. Because as absurd as it sounds, the Greenland crisis is not a side story. It is a catalyst. President Trump's renewed push to purchase Greenland from Denmark wasn't received as negotiation. It was received as intimidation. When Denmark, a loyal NATO ally, refused, Trump didn't shrug it off. He escalated. He threatened tariffs. He mocked the refusal. And in doing so, he terrified the Nordic bloc. To Washington, Greenland is strategy. To Europe, it was a warning. As Arctic ice melts, new shipping lanes and resource corridors are opening. Control of the Arctic is control of the next century's trade routes. And when the US openly pressures a small ally over territory, Sweden, Finland, and Norway start asking a dangerous question. If America can bully Denmark, what stops it from bullying us? That question has consequences. The Nordic countries are now moving deeper into EU-led defense structures, further away from a US-centered NATO. Another brick in the wall, another lock quietly changed. History may record January 2026 as the turning point, the moment the Eurasian rimland closed ranks. Europe and India shook hands. Trade flowed east. Defense coordination followed. And the Atlantic world that once revolved around Washington began to rotate without it. Donald Trump promised to put America first. And in a narrow sense, he succeeded. America is first in tariffs, first in withdrawals, first in isolation, but last in the room where the future is being written. There is no official document banning the United States from NATO. No declaration expelling America from the global order. But when your allies build the world's largest trade deal without you, when they reroute supply chains around you, when they stop trusting your word, your memory, and your respect for their dead, you don't need to be banned. You've already been left behind. The EU-India deal is signed. The ink is dry. The tariffs are up. The walls are higher than ever. Welcome to the new world order. One where America is still powerful, but no longer central. This story is still unfolding. The US response is expected within days, and it will likely mean more tariffs, more threats, and more isolation. So the real question isn't whether this soft ban exists. It's whether America notices before it becomes permanent. Subscribe to stay ahead of the money, the treaties, and the silences between world leaders. And ask yourself this: did America leave the world, or did the world finally move on without it?